Last segment for the day here on CEO Money. Kate Delaney in for Michael Yorba. I'm fascinated by this next topic. But, Ed, I think I'm fascinated by everything today. So,
Yes.
to be honest, we started off great when we started talking to Giovanni Gallucci, and we talked about influence, etc. And, of course, with businesses, it's also about that money flow, right? Because we can be the influencer, but we have to have the money flow. So Heather Endresen joins us. She's a senior loan officer, Live Oak Bank. Heather, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So you manage all aspects of SBA lending units for banks, for example, across the board. Bank of California, most recently, would be one, right? And you've done this for 25 years. And from what I understand, you're one of the tops in the biz, no question about it. So again, I'm glad you popped on with us. And we look at some big changes that are happening, especially in the entrepreneurial space. And you know, as those businesses grow, and it's like when I look at big corporations, they had to start off somewhere. They started off small, but I think people forget that. So what's the growth in the number of small businesses looking like to you?
Well, thanks for asking that question. What we're seeing, we've been focusing on acquisition lending, so financing someone who's buying a small business with SBA funding for the last 8 years. And in the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen a dramatic shift in the type of buyer. So previously, the type of buyer we would tend to finance would be someone who is sort of semi-retired from a big company employment and was sort of buying their next job by buying one of these companies. But in the last few years, we've seen a shift to more professional buyers that we've come to call kind of in two buckets, independent sponsors. Usually these are folks that have a private equity or investment banking background who've decided to come down to the small business space and acquire a company and run it. And then we've also seen the growth, a tremendous growth in a group called search funds. And these are pretty fascinating because these are folks that actually are learning how to buy a small business through their MBA programs at places like Harvard and Stanford and University of Virginia, to name a few. So we've definitely seen a shift.
So what's the biggest difference in your dealings with them? Because that's two different kinds of groups.
Absolutely. So what I've seen is that the new type of buyers that we're seeing more of have a very disciplined approach to how they approach the space, how they will structure their deals, and they tend to know a little bit more about deal making as well as operating companies. And honestly, they are chasing what they see as a growing opportunity. The reason this is happening is because we have a tremendous number of our small businesses in this country are owned by baby boomers. They were a very entrepreneurial generation, and they are getting older. And so simply the statistics are that many of them, as many as 41%, are over the age of 65. The owners are over the age of 65, and they're looking to retire. And they are, in most cases, going to need to sell the business to somebody, to a third party, in order to accomplish that.
Hi, Heather. It's Ed Baxter. First of all, I want to thank you for joining us and accepting my invitation. And I thought it was really important that people actually heard this from you, because obviously I heard it from you in our own dealings. And I guess I fall in that first category, the independent sponsor. And I want to thank you for what you've done for me from an advice standpoint, teaching standpoint, however you want to look at it. How important is it for people who are looking to acquire, let's say they are an independent sponsor, how important is it to partner with someone like Live Oak to essentially have that second set of eyes to look at your deal and to make sure you're on the right track and your pricing is correct?
Yeah, it's pretty important because as you opened the segment with, the money has to be there. You might find the opportunity and you may have the equity piece, but you've got to have the debt piece with you as well. So I think it's very critically important for your own efficiency, if nothing else, to partner with a lender who knows the space well early on and get that advice, bounce deals off of each other so that we're on the same page. By the time you actually have something you're going to move forward with a letter of interest, you have your debt behind you. And we think that's pretty important.
One of the things that you essentially taught me for the most part is the analysis side of it. Can you kind of talk about how Live Oak actually goes into the analysis process and helps you actually not structure, but evaluate the deal, and obviously give people like me advice in looking at it specifically, am I doing it the right way? Am I not doing it the right way? Is there a different way to do it?
Yeah. I mean, we have a historical look back that we do on cash flow, and that's pretty important as far as how lenders will tend to look at these things. And we'll be happy to take the numbers that you might have from the seller and cast them into our model and show you, if they meet certain benchmarks within that model, that generally fits our criteria to go forward with. And then there's also the structure side is very important. The price, of course, but then also the structure. How much equity are you bringing in? And also how much should the seller carry? And we're kind of a firm believer that the seller should always carry some. And how we structure that seller carry note can be, critically important in terms of making the deal work.
Having gone through that process with you, I can vouch for what Live Oak Bank does with regard to the acquisition side, especially for those of us who are independent sponsors and looking to acquire cash flowing businesses owned by baby boomers, because those are the ones you've seen from us. As far as the SBA is concerned, what are some of the things that people should think about when they consider financing an acquisition via SBA lending?
Yeah, so the first one is that the SBA does require a personal guarantee. In some larger loans that are conventional type loans, they may be able to get financing without a personal guarantee, but once you're within the SBA program, we do have to have that personal guarantee. We also have to have at least 10% cash equity from our buyer. That could be from an investor group. So a lot of our new buyers, these new, more professional type buyers, independent sponsors and search funds, they do bring in their own money, plus they usually bring in some investor money, and that's perfectly okay for an SBA loan. The other thing to know about an SBA loan in this space is it's a 10-year term and a 10-year amortization, which is really a lot better than they would get on a conventional basis. Typically, a conventional loan will be about a 5-year amortization and would require probably a lot more than 10% equity, more like 25 to 30% equity. So the SBA terms are fairly liberal, it's a great loan if you're looking in the lower middle market.
Who are the buyers, Heather? I'm curious about that, the demographics of the buyers besides guys like Ed. So I've got a demographic sitting next to me. But who else is out there that are the buyers? Is it male to female? What does that tend to be?
Oh, boy. As a female, I'm sorry to say it is mostly male. I wish I would see more females. It is mostly male. It is a much more young group now than it used to be. So those search funds are typically folks that came out of an MBA program in the last 2 or 3 years. So there's actually a new young cohort, which is nice to see, and I think something important to see, in terms of entrepreneurship in this country. And sometimes it is the key manager of the business. So a lot of times the seller that's looking to retire decides to sell to their employees, their loyal employees that have been with them for a long time, and they'll even help fund some of their equity injection at that point. So we see key managers coming in. We see independent sponsors like Ed coming in and using their experience with deal making and running companies. And then we're seeing these young MBA search fund folks coming in. Those are primarily what our buyers are made up of.
Do you see, it's interesting because you said the thing about women that, sorry to say, not very many women. Do you see that changing given where we are now today?
I think so, especially with the younger search funds. They're definitely promoting some of their young MBA female students to take this path. It does offer, a more flexible schedule for a lot of people when they look at owning their own business versus working for a big company. And I think that is appealing to women. And I think just having more women examples, as we have more women examples, they're all willing to kind of bring in other women who are thinking about it. So I do think it's slowly shifting, and certainly the opportunity is there, for more women to get into the space.
Yeah. When we talk about money and shifting money, and obviously you starting where you started and then ending up in the position as the senior loan officer, Live Oak Bank, I'm just curious about this. To you, what was the best loan you think you ever made?
Oh, wow. The best loan. There's a lot of ones that come to mind when you say that. I think the best feeling is when I know that I have worked with somebody for quite some time. I usually work with them, many, many months before they find the right deal for them. And when I see that they get that deal closed and they move forward with that company and do all the great things that they thought they could do when they bought it. And I have a lot of examples like that, fortunately. I think this is a great space for people who want to take a small company maybe modernize it with, some technology and bring in new sales channels. And I definitely have seen that play out many, many times. I don't have one favorite. I have a lot of really good success stories.
I like it. Perfect place to end this. Heather Endresen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We wrap up with that and thank a few people. Ed Baxter, who you heard, of course, and you hear every day, Private Equity Spotlight and such. Fish, the producer, California Diamond on the technicals, and the rest of the crew. We'll see you tomorrow on CEO Money.